Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Source of the Source, the podcast and live on whatever platform that you're watching this on now. The screen is working, which talks about things like learning and training and all of those important things. Well, we think they're important anyway, and we hope you as the listener do too. Today's guest is Andy Baker. Thank you for coming along to talk to both me and Marianne today, Andy. Marianne, where did you find Andy?
I don't know, Andy, if I do like your surname because that's my maiden name. So
awesome.
I think maybe because I was involved with the Care Connector network and I was doing a lot of care kind of stuff, and you sort of move in different circles, don't you? Or you see different people's posts. And I remember having seen you on there, and then I'd asked about people coming onto the podcast, and you responded. So
yeah, I think I got linked over by a lady called Paula Cashmore.
Oh yes, lovely Paula. Yeah,
she sent me the details of you guys and stuff, so I reached out from there.
Yes. So
Cool.
yeah, I think I'd seen you on the circuit.
There is a kind of a trainer circuit, isn't there? Where
Trainers are a funny one. I think trainers definitely are scared of me, even though I am one, which we'll explain in a bit. So yeah, I often actually don't get very many trainers come on my posts.
Okay, interesting.
It's always interesting. Isn't it interesting who comments on people's posts and who doesn't and who turns up? Andy, tell us a little bit about you.
Right, okay, so I class myself, I suppose, or other people do, as a behaviour specialist. So I've been in the health and social care sector for over 25 years. My background is psychotherapy and various forms of behaviour management, worked cross-sector, so worked in dementia care, or elderly care, learning disabilities, mental health, children's homes, been a foster parent. So I've kind of worked across the spectrum. I started specialising in complex behaviours about 20 years ago. Started my training journey as in-house trainer, and then moved into freelancing, and then kind of started my own company. So my company's been going for 11 years now. We are the external training organisation of the Alzheimer's Society. We are partnered with another major dementia charity called Dementia Forward. So we do a lot of stuff in the space around dementia. Published author, best-selling author in a specific book called The Adaptive Caregiver Model. And also we've got then the Targeting the Positive book, which is more around cross-sector, but understanding behaviour, particularly around trauma. And those kind of areas, but then a multiple entrepreneur. So I also have an awarding body or a CPD accreditation company, a martial arts studio, which is a bit left field. I do business mentoring and got a business networking company, and there's something else that I'm missing off there. So a conference center, that's the other one that I forgot about. There you go.
Wow, lots of different hats that you're wearing.
Yes.
Did you start the martial arts thing because you had bad payers? And
it's never come in handy, which is a shame. So yeah,
there we go.
Had to track them down to be able to do that.
Well, I know all three of us have an interest in psychology and have studied that at some point or other in our lives. What got you into psychology?
So when I was at school, I wanted to be a zoologist. Well, I wanted to be David Attenborough, I think is what I wanted to be. So that's
we all want to be David Attenborough. Everybody wants to be.
Absolutely. So I took drama and biology because I thought that's definitely what he did at school. And the story kind of goes that I loved animals, but it was animal behavior that I loved more than anything else. Had no idea about human psychology particularly. At 16, I got mugged at knife point. And I was already a black belt in karate at that point. So I got so much grief from people like, why didn't you disarm him? Why didn't you kill him? And so I kind of went on a bit of a shame spiral, really. Not kind of a trauma cycle, but a shame spiral. Like, why didn't I do anything? Why didn't I run away? And so I started investigating one a little bit more like personal safety stuff. And I came across the work of a guy called Jeff Thompson. Jem Thompson was a long-term martial artist who'd started looking at the psychology of violence and fear response. And that kind of took me down a bit of a rabbit hole where I started like just studying myself, but still didn't really understand that psychology was a subject that I could study. It wasn't available at school. And it wasn't until years later when I started working in care, then I moved into the pub sector for a bit, then I went back to care. And then it was then that I kind of went, oh, maybe I should go and study it. So I did Open University and studied psychology at that point, and then started studying psychotherapy as well. And then that's where I started to be introduced to the world of a kind of behaviour support and doing principles of PBS, as well as therapeutic parenting that I learned and got taught when I was fostering and things like that. So kind of combined all those skills. But that was the journey to get to that point, essentially.
I love people's journey stories. They're the best in the world. So basically, you were initially interested in the behaviour of animals and then realised that humans are probably the most interesting animal on the planet when it comes to behaviour.
Exactly.
We're still trying to work it out, right? Nobody
Yes.
really understands how humans behave.
No, not at all. I consider myself to be, I compare it, obviously, this is the most complex structure in the known universe, being the human brain. It's a complex system, and complex systems means we've got chaos theory and fractals and stuff like that involved there. So it's a bit like the weather. So I consider myself to be a fairly mediocre weatherman, in the fact that I roughly know whether it's going to rain or shine, but I still might get caught outside in nothing but shorts in a rainstorm, because humans are complex.
Yeah, no, humans are messy. They're very complex and all of those things. Briefly on that point about the weather, when I used to do radio shows and we used to get given the weather report, etc., I used to just look out the window. You know, because it always used to make me laugh when you listen to a radio show and they're giving you the weather forecast for what the weather is like now. And they clearly, if they looked out the window, they could see that it's doing the complete opposite. You might as well just say what's going on outside, you know?
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
I always love that weather station, which is just a stone on a string that you put outside your window. And if it's wet, it's raining. If it's moving, it's windy. If it's got snow on it, and that's the best weather system you can use.
Tell us a bit more about the training side of things, because I know Marianne will be keen to have a conversation with you about that.
Yeah. So my passion and my joy is to share knowledge with others, to change mindsets is one of my fundamental aims in life. My raison d'etre, or my purpose in life, is to help as many people as I possibly can to better understand themselves and others, to improve well-being, outcomes and connection. So teaching is one of the most wonderful ways of sharing that.
What's the hardest thing about it?
Oh, the hardest thing about it. There's a few things that I think are challenging. I don't know whether hard, and this is where maybe there's a shift in my mindset that happened over time, that I've definitely had to support some of my trainers at times when they've kind of had a tough group, or a group that kind of challenged and was maybe slightly oppositional to what they were saying, or didn't just kind of comply. And I have been doing this a fair while, really. So I suppose I've learned through my own mistakes and experiences and stuff. And again, understanding behavior in psychology is a case of, well, there's usually a reason for that. It's not they're just aiming to be difficult. There's something underpinning that. But one of the things I had to try and help them to get over was that, well, the easy groups isn't who you want. The easy groups just give you a sense of validation, make you feel all cozy and warm. It's the challenging groups that are the ones that you're going to make the biggest difference. And I think that it's a shift in mindset that takes some time to get used to, that actually when you've got somebody who disagrees with you, good. That's why you're in the room. The people who already agree with you, you don't need to be there. So actually that kind of challenge is the most important part. It's a challenge to overcome. It's a conversation to have. It's a seed to plant in somebody's mind to go, hey, there's a different way of seeing the world, or a situation or a circumstance that we want to open them up to. So that thing that is probably the hardest, I think, is actually probably the most rewarding.
That's what I found when I was doing supply teaching. There'd be a few times that I was sent to grammar school, and I didn't like it because my background was working children's homes, foster care, all that kind of thing. And I found it really boring. And when I often hear people talking about teachers and they talk about schools and what's the best school, and I go, well, it depends what we define by best. I said, you probably will find the teacher that are most dedicated to what they do will come from the schools where the children are, as people would say, challenging. I'm going to say it's because their needs aren't being met. You know, those teachers are there because they want to make that difference. And it's not about saying people are right or wrong, but I think it depends on why you're there. It's not just about the subject. I found when I went into training trainers and teachers that I actually really liked the developmental side of it. The subject was neither here nor there, but that was just part of it. And I found in the care sector that for me, where I was at in my stage in my life with my circumstances, that within the care sector, like obviously you set up as you are, that you're able to work in the care sector. So for me, the frustrations were that I could go in and deliver a session, but that's only part of the story, because actually what we're seeing a lot more, that I'm seeing, that suddenly people are going, well, it's not just about the training. You know, very seldom does anybody actually come back to me again, because I've done freelance work because it was suited at the time in terms of the time I had to give to it. I've got children, that kind of stuff. But it never really fulfilled me, because I would feel like I rocked up, delivered, and then I was frustrated because I was sort of having to do supervision with these staff because actually, in order for any of what I was doing to work, they had to be in the right place. You know, when you're walking in and people have got their arms folded, and you know why. I absolutely know why they've got their arms folded. And I said to Graham yesterday, what I'm seeing is that, you know, yes, you can do online learning, but, you know, people will have different opinions about it, particularly doing what I do. So I'm training trainers. A lot of people don't have a you to support them. So there's a lot of people out there doing what they do. I said, so people do their e-learning, train the trainer. And I said, but actually that doesn't really do anything. It ticks that box, but they don't get all the stuff they get, which is someone like me working with them and teaching them, how do you deal with this situation? And I go, well, I can't tell you, because there's an infinite number of possibilities how a session will work out, but I can work with you so that you will feel much more comfortable. Somebody spoke to me yesterday, and it was around AI training. They said, oh, I'm a trainer, but if I'm going to be going into teaching people more as a qualification, but also teaching anyway, I'm a bit scared. And I said, what are you scared about? You know your stuff. And they said, it turned out that it was to do with people not really knowing what they needed to know. And I said, but that was the difference between learning how to do it, is that I know those questions to ask.
Yeah.
I know the questions to ask so that I can give them, because it's problem solving. Really, training should be, as you do it, it should be seen as problem solving, not just information giving, which is a lot of what seems to go on. And what was interesting that came out of the conversation was this guy said, but I'm worried that a load of safeguarding stuff comes up, you know, about like, should they use, this was on games and stuff as well, about roadblocks, or it could be Grand Theft Auto. You know I had that come up when I worked in the children's homes, kids wanting to go on Grand Theft Auto. And I said, but it's never really that simple though. It's never really that simple, because I know that my kids want to, and again, Graham and I talked about this, I make the decision as a parent as to, there's not, you know, legally, should they, shouldn't they? This isn't like they're going to buy alcohol, because you could, you know, we know you can't, an under 18-year-old can't buy alcohol, but you could drink it at a table, let's just say. It's never really that cut and dry. And so I think a lot of it, as you said, Andy, is that it's not about knowledge. Anybody can have the knowledge. You can have a PowerPoint, and you've got that knowledge. The fact is, it's when someone asks you a question, and I said, but I don't ever feel scared. I don't ever feel scared because there isn't an actual answer. I will say to them, there isn't an actual answer. And I do think that a lot of the trainers that are out there that have worked in the care sector tend, I'm not going to say always, but tend to be better trainers.
Yeah.
Not as the most confident, and I think a lot of that comes from being a carer, thinking you're not good enough, but actually they are some of the best trainers, because they're aware that whenever you say something, you've got to be really careful about how that can be taken, and who's going to use it afterwards. So you're really aware of that kind of thing. But yeah, I think that for me, as you said, I think when you've worked in that sort of, when you've got that background, normal is really boring.
Does a lot of that resonate, Andy? I mean, do you feel like actually in 2026, a lot of what goes under the umbrella of training is not training, it's performance?
Yeah, definitely. And the stuff, and I think that, as you mentioned there, Marianne, kind of a journey for any trainer, and a lot of kind of soul searching in a way. And I'm writing another book at the minute, because I just love what I do, which talks exactly about this. I recognize that maybe my early stance as a trainer was sometimes more performative. It was more about getting the audience to like me than it was sometimes passing on the information. And I think that's a fine line between the two. You've got to build rapport with an audience, because people are more likely to take information from somebody they connect with, or they can feel like at least some level of rapport with. You know, I do speaking, not just training as well. And sometimes I've seen speakers who fall into the trap of becoming performative rather than actually relying on the message that's important. And I think that's sometimes, the people pleasing, but I want to be liked. And sometimes I've been very willing to be unliked in a training session because I need to get that information over. And it will cause some discomfort, but cognitive dissonance should create an element of discomfort. Sometimes people are acting ways that they know are wrong, and they need somebody to call them out in that way to kind of go, look, it was going into what you were saying there about the problem solving side of things for me. And there's two things that I try and do in my training sessions. One is evoke a change of mindset. That is one of the things I try and get, because as you said, I've got to get the arms to relax before the person will potentially take anything in. But it's also the stuff I teach around behavior. It's, it's all very well and good. People have this toolbox of conflict management tools, for instance, but they won't use them if they don't understand and feel the need to use them is absolutely vital. So everything I do is mindset led, because I recognized it being fundamental to make change. But the other part is, as you said, people really want black and white answers, and people want black and white answers, especially when they're in a state of stress, because so it's shifting them away from that into actually giving them the skills to problem solve, making them question, making them figure out themselves, which is not then just lecturing them and telling them how to think. It's about forcing them to then go, okay, well, how does this work? Why does this work? Why would I make that choice rather than that choice? And I think that's, the true skill of a genuine facilitator. And I think, we all have to start somewhere.
I did my PGCE because I was asked. I worked in foster care, and they said, "Would I deliver some training for them?" And I thought, I'm definitely somebody that we have many a conversation about imposter syndrome, and I don't feel comfortable with that. So I will go and do whatever it is I need to do so that I know that I've got what I feel that I would need. It all worked out pretty well. I'd done my psychology degree. I hated every second of it. I now understand why. A, it wasn't taught well, and B, I didn't really understand myself at the time. And I always knew that I was probably going to need to do something else, because I did my degree and then I was working. My dad took his own life. Life didn't for a while. I was probably in a state of, I don't really know what's going on in the world. And it worked in lots of different sectors. So I did my PGCE, and I did it in post-compulsory education and training because I wanted to train carers. That's exactly why I did it. I did it all of about 9 months, and then I had a baby and the council didn't want me anymore. I taught in college situations. I taught blind students, and then I was teaching in a school because I was doing supply work because it fitted well with the kids. And I thought, I don't really know if I like this, because the problem I had, I was teaching a subject. I could see really what I needed to be doing was working with the behaviour, because the two don't work, which is the problem we've got with the education sector now. So I was sort of like, I don't really know what I'm doing here, to be quite honest, because I felt like I was failing them. And so in the end, I left teaching because I thought I can't keep being somewhere where I don't feel like I'm doing good. I then accidentally fell into teaching teachers at the National Star, where Katie Price's son went to college. And I thought, God, I really like this. Like, this is like, I feel at home here. And then it sort of just carried on from there for me. But the minute I started teaching people to teach, I thought, God, I've been a terrible teacher. I was awful. And it was every time I deliver a session, I learn from it. So whether it is as, I don't know if, Andy, I think you may have said it. So I teach quite a lot of people in the construction sector. And so I'm changing, I would say arguably, I'm changing mindsets a lot, actually. So we talk about culture change, but really it's about mindset change. So I will get somebody in front of me that's been in this sector, this is how it's always done. But because they feel safe with me and I build up that rapport with them, they feel safe to be able to be themselves. Mm-hmm. And then when I ask that question, you say it's banter and you say it's this. How would you feel if your wife was spoken to you like that, or your daughter, or your mum? That's the minute. And then they're forever changed then, because when they go back, I said, you're going to change your mindset when you go back to work. But when you're changing the next generation, when you're training the next generation, that's where that change comes about. When you call somebody out for saying, I love, or like whatever it is. Yeah. That's it. And it is, as you said, it's about behaviour change. And I think the problem we've got with training, and it's not about dissing e-learning, but you don't have that person in front of you. And I think a lot of people welcome, like you said, they welcome being challenged, because it is we all would rather say somewhere safe, wouldn't we? But you've got to feel safe with that person. You've got to feel safe. And I would say people that have studied psychology, the people that have been taught by them, feel safe, because this isn't about performance. This isn't about, I'm going to show off to you as everything that I know. because that becomes like the parent wagging the finger. And I don't think everybody has that. And I think people think it's easy.
Oh, yeah.
Not everybody can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody can do it. There's a lot of people that know their stuff. There's a lot of people that are good with people. But I don't think that many people are actually naturally very good at teaching and training people. I'll probably be shot down for that.
And isn't it partly because training isn't about knowing your stuff? It's also about accepting that you don't know your stuff, right? As you were talking, both of you, one of the things that really sits with me is that isn't the gulf between e-learning and being in the room with people getting wider? Because actually, maybe years ago, a lot of training was just disseminating information. Like today, folks, we're going to learn this, right? And, that's it. This is the golden rule. Learn it. But now, surely, a lot of training is about creating the opportunity in the room to encourage people to think and explore and understand and together create better understanding. And therefore, it's kind of an almost, hate the word, but organic process. Whereas in the main, a lot of e-learning is granulated, tick A, B, it's logical. It's like, well, that's wrong or this is right. Keep going round. If you do it 30 times, you'll get the right answers. And
which is
now
just
you've passed it.
It's not doing anything other than that.
Yeah. And I'm sure as we move forward that a lot of AI will get built into that to kind of then look at what people are doing and then say, okay, so you've kind of understood some of that. And how about this? And perhaps learn from people's responses as well and it will get cleverer. The thing that makes a lot of really good in-person training work well are the people in the room. Yeah.
It's all the people in the room. I've often said to people as well, if bringing somebody from outside is a good thing for many different reasons. I think in terms of the culture, if you get somebody coming from outside, I've spotted things and that probably wouldn't have been picked up. But if you have somebody consistently that comes in, communicate with me, then actually I can then say, okay, what issues have you got in at the moment? So I might be coming in to do dementia training, let's just say, but actually I can weave nicely in something else that you're doing. I've done supervision with groups and I've stopped people leaving. I've sorted out relationships just in 2 hours of being with them. And I think that the really worrying thing is, and again, Andy, I'm sure you find it, and the biggest thing I find is, I have coaches out there that say, oh, you've got to make your voice louder, better, more sharp, or whatever it is they might say. And I, not arrogantly, I'd say, but I'm not the problem. But if the people that have the money aren't listening properly, it doesn't matter. I've started a community to try and support trainers that are working on their own so that they can actually understand what language to use, because it's not about saying what you know, because that doesn't get you the work, unfortunately. Well, it does for some people, but generally speaking, it's not going to get you the work. And I do feel really sad that where the money is spent or how it is spent isn't considered enough. It's like, oh, just spend it on this because that ticks that off. And I'm like, I know, but if you'd have worked with me, if the company communicates with me well, you've actually got an educational consultant. You've got a consultant built in with that, because I will say to you the stuff that I'm hearing. Because you and I both know, Andy, and Graham, you've had it as well. If you want to know anything, go and ask a trainer what they've heard in that session, because you will find far more out than you will from anything else. I've had managers say, oh, well, we have supervisions and we have this. And I go, yeah, all right. You're not going to hear the truth from it. And so it's not about going in and doing a one-off. That's the biggest thing.
And I think that's there's something you mentioned there that I think what I try and teach when for my internal trainers and stuff, when we're doing the getting where they need to get to, I teach them something that seems completely counterintuitive, and I think they find it a strange thing to say, that a great trainer is not a good talker, they're a great listener. And it's that principle you said there of picking up the room and looking at the room and reading the messages of how the individuals are communicating, the non-verbal kind of like little eye rolls or the little kind of feeling of awkwardness when you've called out a behavior. I know you're doing it, but I'm letting you know you shouldn't do it. And I can see the kind of reaction where people are looking around going, oh, nobody tell him.
What's going on?
Yeah, you don't need to have them say anything. You pick up so much from the room by being a great listener. And it was then coming back to something that you said, Graham, which was, when I'm designing my sessions and when I've kind of, from the moment I started freelancing, I recognized very early on that people, there's an old adage, isn't there? People don't remember what you say. They don't remember who you are. They remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
And so in every training session, I'm always looking like, how can I evoke feelings in this session? You gave the example as well, Marianne, related to, the builder, by creating that cognitive dissonance. Well, imagine it was your daughter, imagine it was your wife. How would you feel? And it's that emotional reaction that a person gets that's going to stay with them and it's going to last past the session. And that's what e-learning doesn't provide. It doesn't create emotional tension. It doesn't create laughter, because sometimes laughter can be a really powerful memory aid, because it's still, hey, do you remember that time he said that? It was funny, and it stays in the head more. We know that emotional memories outlast rational, logical memories. That's why everybody remembers what they were doing at 9/11, but don't remember what they were doing last Thursday. It's exactly that. So yeah, there's two skills in there which e-learning is never going to have, because e-learning doesn't listen, and it doesn't necessarily look to evoke emotions.
I was very, very saddened when I found out that, well, there's two things really. I saddened when I found out you could do the training online, because of course now that will often, with many organisations, it becomes the option. The person that's being taught probably wouldn't choose that way of doing it anyway. So it then becomes a tick box. It doesn't become a solution. It makes me feel sad, because actually, for many people who are neurodivergent, particularly, that's not how they would choose to do it. And I often will say to carers when I've come in and trained them, they've said, oh God, it's so amazing to have you come in, because I'm thick, I'm stupid, and I don't get it. And I go, right, can we just stop right there? You're not stupid. It's just that being taught that way doesn't work for you. And I hate the fact that they've been carrying that around, and it takes me to come in. I talk about my neurodiversity as well, which then creates that, okay, well, you get me kind of thing. I say about this, but of course it doesn't often happen, that people have the right to ask for training that works for their disability. And if that means doing it face to face, I do wonder how many people exercise that right, because they don't think they've got that right, and they won't have been made aware of that right, because making somebody aware of that right means they might exercise it, strangely enough, and that's going to cost money. Well, tough. If you want it to do the job that it should be doing, which is change that behaviour so that somebody can do a better job, that it should happen because they want to, because they want to.
Well, I'll give you an example, if that's okay. As far as I had a conversation with a learning development lead at a particular organisation. So I've known this lady for a while. She's kind of the dementia lead, and they pulled her in as dementia lead, looking for her to provide training. But it's such a big organisation. She's not even making a dent in the amount of training he's doing, and they're still doing the learning training. And then they were kind of talking about getting this company in, and they were kind of going, oh, they're kind of cheap. And I'm not, discrediting any other company. Hey, if they can keep their overheads over, maybe they can keep things cheap. Brilliant. But she knows me. She knows I know my stuff. She knows that, I have some value in what we do, and the way we provide training helps it to stick and helps it to be emotive and helps it to actually make cultural and emotional mindset change. So she wants me, but the owner is all about like cutting costs, and he's always talking about cutting costs and stuff like that, and how do I overcome that? And so I said to her, like, I do have some benefits, obviously, certain things because I've worked very hard to achieve as far as some credibility in the book and things like that. So I said, well, start off going to your marketing team and just seeing what they're currently putting out to drive individuals looking at residential care towards them, and would having a specific training from a specific person who's actually kind of semi-niche famous, could that be something they could use in their marketing channels? Then go to HR and go, would, if marketing was sort of promoting this, would it help to improve recruitment? Because suddenly then staff looking around where they work, suddenly they're seeing the stuff going, oh, this care home's doing something different. Maybe I should go and try there. So reducing recruitment costs, but also then when I go in, change mindset, improve outcomes, improve that quality of care and self-care of the carers, we're actually finding we're getting lower recruitment costs because we're getting low staff turnover, which is reducing the amount of training costs. So you go to HR, you find out how much you could potentially save from them. You go to marketing, see how much you could potentially save from them, and then go to your owner and go, hey, I've got a plan for this company to come in and deliver face-to-face training, and I think it'll save us this much.
Mm. Do you think part of the problem is that actually good training isn't training, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Good training is actually part of an ongoing dialogue, right? So I think the big problem in a lot of organisations is that they see that they need to do training. They don't need to do training. They need to have an ongoing dialogue with their people and be exploring topics with their people, exploring areas of, cultural development within their organization with their people. And good trainers coming in will find ways of keeping that good dialogue alive and helping create cultural transformation within the business. So actually, it's not training.
Many of the problems that are actually out there aren't anything to do with training. Not as anybody would think that it would be. I mean, you do have the mandatory training, and of course there's mandatory training and there's refreshers. But for a start, when I was thinking about setting up on my own, so I knew I had a teacher training qualification. Okay, I've ticked that box bit there, fine. Then I was thinking about, okay, so when I go out and do care training in my background, you're going to laugh here. I was speaking to a colleague of mine, and it was actually somebody that I'd trained. This person had been a trainer for 18 years. So lots of people are training for years, not necessarily know how to do it. And I know that's a bone of contention. But anyway, he came on my course and said, oh my gosh, I wish I'd done this before because I know my stuff. He said, but if nothing else, I feel much more confident. I'm, all this kind of stuff. The frustration I have is you don't get to have that dialogue. Like you said, I'm doing the organizational learning and development level 5. Do I have to do it? Not really. Why am I doing it? Because I'm fed up of people not taking me seriously, that, oh, you're just a teacher. And I'm like, well, for a start, I'm not just in anything. I think that the problem you've got is that the mandatory training is, oh, we'll just roll it out like that. Yeah, so I was sort of saying, when I started out, I said to Dave, bearing in mind I've delivered qualifications, I know what the criteria is. So I'm like, okay, I have to teach this and then all of the niceties around it. I said, where do I look? What is it I have to deliver? Are there any? And he said, no, there aren't. I was like, well, how does that work then? He said, well, you just know. And I went, yeah, but how does anybody know that they know? Like, how does this work? And it blew my mind for quite a while. Then I said, right, okay, if I'm going to do moving and handling training, surely I must need, what do I need in order to do that? I've seen that they talk about train the trainers. So off I trot, I contact some companies and I said, okay, I've got a training qualification. Do I need to do a train the trainer? Yes. Do I? Yes. And I said, right, okay, why? Because you do. And I went, yeah, but you're not actually telling me why. I said, if it's legally I've got to, then like, absolutely. So I thought, right, okay, how does this work then with your trainer? Oh, well, it's a 2-day course. My eyebrows raised anyway. I said, right, okay, can I see the spec or the curriculum? There was barely anything in there on actual training. I said, right, okay, so I do this 2-day course. How much is it going to cost? £490. I'm like, what? Okay. So I said, so what happens then? Well, you've got to do a refresher every 2 years. I went, okay, fair enough. Is that like a half-day course? No, you've got to redo the course all over again. I mean, really, where do I go with that? Where do I go with that? Because there isn't anywhere to go with it. I saw you, Andy, looking. Straight away, you're telling me that I've got to do this. And I'm like, no, you haven't got to do that at all. If you're spending lots of money on people doing lots of train the trainers, I did the sums the other day and put it out there. I was asked to go into a company and do, I think it was like 5 different trainers with lots of different carers. And I said, but you do know that's a waste of money. Like, it's going to be boring as well. If I'm teaching the same people, it's going to be boring if nothing else. Problem is, these companies are very good at doing the marketing and convincing people they'll buy, and then they won't listen to someone like me. I could do that if I wanted to. Mm-hmm. I literally could go and make lots of money doing that. It doesn't, it doesn't sit well for me. If you have somebody that is involved in that training, be it like you coming in from outside to somewhere, you can have all those conversations like you had about, well, actually, what is it we're trying to achieve here? And I've learned lots from doing the qualification I'm doing. I'm going, okay, I'm going to look at it from the purse strings point of view, but they equally need to look at it from that point of view. And that's where I'm seeing that the people that are moving into care have got money, but they're not necessarily in it for the right reasons, unfortunately. Not all.
Well, absolutely. Or this is not, I don't mean this in any derogatory way, but they're also not very good businessmen or business people, because they're looking at the bottom line rather than the investment. And I think, like, if you run a company from an accountant's point of view, then you'll never invest in training because you can't see the long-term benefits from it. You're looking at how it saves money. But this is exactly the same as like staff numbers when you're looking at care. We cut one member of staff down, that saves us this much a year, even though all of our staff have got huge burnout and we've now got recruitment costs coming out of our ears because our staff turnover is ridiculous. But we've saved money from one staff member not being on. And that's the problem with an accountant viewing a business. And that's why you have to have somebody with vision who looks at the long term, not just the short term, when it comes to kind of investment in training. And that's how I should refer to. And that's one thing that anybody who is selling training out there, do not refer to it as a price. Do not refer to it as a cost. All of my team refer to it as, so the investment in this would be. That is a word that all of my staff use it all the time, because that is a mindset I want to plant in the organizations we're building partnerships with.
And also the carers see it as that.
Yeah,
I had a company, it wasn't care related, it's the security sector, because that's another sector that's not great. They actually had asked me to come in. They'd had to fight to get me to come in as well. And actually I was being brought in because it was about delivering a service. So not people security, we're talking about tech security. And actually saying, well, actually, we've got this bit of kit. And if we don't actually get the people to use the bit of kit properly, and the same happens in the care sector, quite frankly, with a lot of the tech that's out there, that the engineers or the tech people are very good at their bits, but if you want your end user to use it, i.e. the carer, actually they've got to be able to use it properly, and you have to invest in that. And Graham knows, I've spoken to many a company, we know, yeah, we're fine with that. We're fine. We've got a really good salesperson. They're really good at engaging with people. And I go, well, yeah, but you do know that if you're going to go into that care home and you're going to do that, you need to be aware you've got different ages, you've got different learning styles or ways of learning. I know what people say about learning styles, but the way that people are learning, you've got all sorts of stuff that you've got to take into consideration there. And this company had actually fought for me to go in and said, actually, we're selling a high-end product here. It can't do any of that stuff if the person the other end can't actually work it. And so what they've done was actually sold it, and actually it's now something that I'm actually working within the sector that's now come up, is that you have to invest in this bit. You have to invest. It's not a nice to have. If you actually want the people to be able to use that properly and have less call outs, because every time it doesn't work, we're talking, top football clubs or whatever, then you have to be able to train those people properly. And it's now being seen that it's funny though that the minute you start talking about the costs, how much is it going to cost every time you've got a call out? What about the fact that it's a company reputation? Because when we're at a football match, if they can't actually get that information, and then you bring the law into it, that you've got Martin's law now, that's now being brought into it. Places where you have events, they have a legal responsibility now to ensure the safety of the public that are coming in. And part of that, then, when you start looking at it, and this is what I talk about training, is it's about whose responsibility is this? That actually, if the person that's sitting in the control room doesn't understand how to use it, you might as well not have one there. You literally might as well not have one there. And
do you know what? One of the things you're mentioning there, which is so fundamental to this whole conversation, is that in the UK in particular, too many companies are responsive, not proactive, and they are responsive and not proactive because we only respond to things like that when compliance is put into place. Yeah. We only respond when it's the law, right? We're very short-sighted. We do not see that actually doing it right the first time round, as Andy was talking about, is the right way to do it, And especially I can talk from a tech point of view, having been involved in tech companies. I'm going to say that there's so many tech companies out there that will use the salesman to do the training as and when it happens, because actually the product doesn't work. The product doesn't actually do what it says on the tin, right? And there's a lot of smoke and mirrors in that sector. Now I'm going to get shot down, but it's true, right?
So I've already been shot down anyway already. So.
And so the company that you're talking about, the reason they want to do it right is actually because they have faith in their product. They have created a decent product. They have got something that's worth talking to people about, and therefore it's then worth them doing it right, because there needs to be an education step in there with clients in order for them to fully appreciate the quality that's gone into that product.
Yeah.
But the reason that a lot of people don't do good training out there, especially around tech, is because actually the tech doesn't actually do what it says. It would show it up immediately.
It's interesting because, Andy, you've been to the care shows, you know, and it's interesting because I will speak to, you can always tell the ones that have worked in the care sector and the ones that are just selling that product to the care sector. And I have advised them before, it might be good if you actually go out and experience the people using your equipment, because you know, I've gone out with the fire service to their training and asked in different sectors, can I come out? I'm actually doing my SIA qualification, the security qualification. Why? So that I can't get the pushback of, what would you know? So as you say, Graham, yeah, great, use the salesperson, but I get frustrated because the end user can't know what they don't know. We're back to that again. They can't know what they don't know, or they'll just get pushback. And fundamentally, that's very damaging to a team if you've got people that just don't know what they're doing. Because and again, you know, this qualification I'm doing, it's stuff I knew, but now I'm able to put it somewhere. So you get like a small family-run home gets taken over by a big chain. They then wade on in, change things. You're going to get people leave because they don't want to work there because it's not run the way that it was. And we get why it's better, because they will have the funding behind them to be able to bring more tech in. It's the same as schools. You get little village schools and you get part of an academy. But actually you get pushback on using that tech. But it's not really that they don't want to. It's because they haven't had it explained to them what the benefits of it are. That actually we're bringing this tech in. I know that it's going to seem like it's really scary. It's going to be a bit of a difficult time, but fundamentally it's going to save you this much time. It's going to mean that you're not doing this at the end of the shift. And I think a lot of the time that if somebody that's coming in that's training on using that, they're still selling it. They're not selling the benefits of it within the sector, because you're not going to know the benefits, are you, unless you're, you know, and that's, as you said, you've got to be in it to be able to fully understand it. And you know what, sometimes say, yeah, I know, it's rubbish. I had some carers once that I think the home had been taken over twice. They'd had an awful time. I got in there, arms folded, and they just started complaining. And I said, you know what, if I were you, I'd be absolutely hacked off. I would feel exactly the same as you. And I said, but what you have to know is that I'm coming in now to try and help with this. And if I'm honest, if you're not willing to take that on board, you might as well leave right now. And they were like, and someone said to me, you said that? I went, yeah, I did. I did. I said to them, the care sector isn't necessarily a great place to work at times. What you've gone through isn't. I can't change that, but I can change, and I will be that person that says that. As you said, Andy, sometimes you have to go in and say things that people might not want to hear. There's a reason there. You know, I had to build up that rapport with them in that minute for them to know that also I will say to them, you know, I absolutely respect what you do. I don't do what you do right now, but I have been where you have been, and I absolutely respect you for doing it. I've seen some people go in and do some training. You know, I've sworn in training before, and people say you shouldn't do that. And I said, but I'll know that actually that was probably the best way that I could connect.
Oh yeah. I swear terribly on training, so if anybody's looking to use me, like, if you don't like bad language, then I apologise. But one of the reasons is because I needed to be authentically myself. And also when you're working with, you know, specialism in distress behaviours, if you can't cope with the trainer swearing, then you probably shouldn't be in this job. Because when you're working with dementia, whether you're working with children who experience trauma and abuse or neurodiversity, then you're going to get some words thrown in your direction. But you're 100% right. And I found that, you know, it's connection before correction is one of my fundamental rules that I teach anyway. And people think that's a mantra that's taught in certain training courses, but it's fundamental human connection. It's how we change every scenario. Because we have to build that connection first before we then look for solution or correction. So if I'm coming in, and this is why you know, we have in our terms that if you're a paramedic, no greens when you're teaching first aid, because you're not being a paramedic. You're teaching first aid, and people want to come in showing off. Yeah, but I'm a paramedic. I don't give a shit. You're teaching first aid.
It's not about that.
So you need to connect with your audience. You need to kind of know, well, what are they going to connect with? It's not to be false. It's not to be inauthentic. I would say there's a professional self, a personal self, and a private self. We're looking at the 3 Ps of social pedagogy. The professional self is how I do present in that moment. I will read the room, and there's certain rooms I would swear less. I can't say I won't swear at all, but I'll swear less.
It's appropriate. I mean, I've seen, again, it's something that Graham is what he does, helping people in terms of how they show up on social media, what a profile like, that kind of thing. And I do really struggle with the fact that there's a lot of coaches, if you want to call them that. I don't actually think I want to call them that, because I think it does us a service on getting people's voices out there and that kind of thing. And I have it with trainers that work with me, because obviously some of them are employed, some aren't. And one of the things I'll often have is they'll say, "Oh my God, I watched so-and-so's micro teach. It was amazing. Mine's awful." They're that. And I said, number one, they're at a different stage in their career, potentially. But also, I said, you need to own who you are. And off the back of that, because somebody in another sector that I know said that they're seeing that, particularly with men in a sales position, and then they have to go and do a presentation, and they're like, "Oh my God, this is like not what," or they're not even in sales and they have to do it. And they're like, "But I'm not very good at this." And I think a lot of it is people don't know who they are. They don't know who they are. So then they get up and they then perform, which feels uncomfortable for some people, because they're like, "I'm not a performer." And I say, just be yourself. And so actually off the back of it, I've written quite a short course on how to be yourself, and people actually doing the work on themselves to find out. And for me, it was when I was diagnosed with ADHD that I was like, and then that's when I became a much better teacher, trainer, who I wanted to be. And I think as a result of that, the people that I teach then, and probably the same as you, they feel comfortable because they feel comfortable with me. So then they can feel comfortable with them. And for some people, it's the first time ever they've ever had that opportunity to be. And it's at that time then people then, I think, then become much more confident, because they're not trying to be something else. And so when you've got trainers that start their own business up and they're freelancing, they often, what I spot, which is part of the reason I wanted to start the community, was to say, just ask me, come and ask in the group. I see people ask on Facebook groups, and then they get 60 people wading on in about what they should do. And I'm like, that's really not helpful when they could be in a community. And I say that if you're just being you might not be that loud, shouty trainer. And that's okay. That's okay. If you connect with the people you're teaching, that's all you want to do. You don't have to be loud. You don't have to wear bright clothes. You don't have to have, something you're known for. You know what I mean? You don't have to be gimmicky with it. Just be you. That's the best tool in the box you've got, I think.
It's definitely how you stand out from the crowd, is by being authentically yourself. Otherwise, you're trying to be somebody that you think other people want to emulate. And comparison is a death of joy. I mean, even from a branding point of view, when you're looking at kind of business development, I remember when I first started developing my training company, I built my training company with a kind of an idea of, I need to build it like what people would expect a training company to look like. And it was far too polished. It was far too clinical. It looked like an accountant's website. And it just so isn't me. And it's taken a long time of personal journey, I think, as much as anything, to recognize that my authentic self needs to be demonstrated throughout my company. It needs to be, fundamentally in my values, and my brand is all authentically me. But that takes some confidence to do, because again, it's that self-identity. It's the being comfortable with themselves, as you rightly said, Marianne.
And knowing you won't get work from some people, and it's like, then you're not my people.
Oh, absolutely. That's hard as well. It's the same with a room, isn't it? I often use an example. Like if I walked into a room of 100 people, more than likely, at least 2 of them wouldn't like me. And more than likely, I probably would have liked 2 of them. And they may not be the same people. But if you then split that room in half and took 50 out, I might still be left with those 2 people. You might split the room in half again, 25. I'm still left with those 2 people. You cut that room in half again. I've now got a room of 12, and those 2 people are in that room, and that sucks.
Yeah.
It's nothing to do with who you are.
I think in a climate where work is hard to come by because there's so much competition, it is easy to, like you say, try and be something you're told to be. I probably don't have as much work as I could if I was something else, but we've looked at it, and I'm now owning the fact that I'm not loud and shouty about it all. I want to sit there quite quietly and say, I just do what I do.
Yeah.
Marianne, Andy, what a great conversation today. Thank you both. We will be back soon with more sauce from the source. But until then, from Marianne and Andy today, bye for now. Thanks for